Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Barry Cohn. I am here to welcome you to Fireproofing the Market, How to Return to Work Changes. I am the CEO and Chief HR Guy at Jorgensen HR and your moderator today. I'm proud also to be a panel sponsor along with USC. I would also like to recognize our track sponsor, Cal Communications. The bios of each of the panelists are already in the journal, so I'm only going to give a brief introduction of all three of them. To my immediate right's Jeffrey Cole, Research Professor, Director of the Center for Digital Future at USC. Selena Thomas, the CEO, founder of 6 Degrees HR Consulting. And Gary Sanger, the President of Sanger Associates. The global community is experiencing a new reality that has reshaped our approach to work. Rather than falling back on old routines, the concept of return to work is an opportunity for employers and employees to find new ways to reconcile business needs with flexibility. Some organizations are reevaluating their work policies and embracing hybrid models, while others are mandating full return to in-person work. I'm going to give each of the panelists 2 minutes to give you a quick opening statement, and then we're going to go to some questions. And after the questions, we're going to open it up to see if you have any questions. And if you do, great. And if not, I can probably figure out a few more questions to ask. So let me start out with Jeff Cole.
Thank you, Barry. It's really nice to see you. What a great setup. Hopefully we can transition from us just talking to you to a conversation. My field, what I'm interested in is disruption, how disruption comes from unexpected places and changes everything. And we in our lifetimes have experienced 2 of the greatest disruptions in human history. The first was digital communication and the internet, which I don't have to begin to explain how that's changed everything. And the second is COVID, which disrupted us. We did an awful lot of work tracking behaviors in COVID to see which changes were temporary and would revert back. Learning remotely was one of them. And then we wanted to look at which changes were permanent. The diminishing of cash and moving to cashlessness is one of those. But in our work on work, we found 3 months into COVID, talking to people who used to show up 5 days a week at an office and asking them, once again, 3 months in, what they wanted to do. Only 10% said they wanted to come back exactly like before. 30% said they never wanted to come back, and 60% wanted a hybrid. Those numbers have changed a bit and have moved that more than 10% now want to come back. But it was clear to me that a war was going to occur, because almost every CEO I talked to said they wanted everybody back full-time like before. Whether that's ego, they liked to walk the hallways and see the troops and it made them feel important, or whether they really believed productivity and culture would suffer, and that working from home on a Friday really just meant a 3-day weekend. One of the first CEOs to take a public position was Elon Musk at Tesla, who used all of his well-known diplomacy and charm to say to his Tesla employees, you can work remotely if you want, as long as you're in the office 40 hours a week. We've seen that this has not changed. During COVID, I did a talk, which I think is one of my better talks, on winners and losers coming out of COVID. One of the big winners was labor. Since I was a little boy, labor has been losing power, unions have been weakening, management has gained strength. That changed coming out of COVID, where all of a sudden there weren't enough staff to keep restaurants open all day. There weren't enough housekeepers for hotels, drivers for Uber. Labor has gained power. We see that with some of the strikes, whether with hotel workers literally going on now, or auto workers, or the entertainment industry. But I think coming back to work, I think we're going to see 2 kinds of workers. I think we're going to see the eager beavers who want to be CEO, want to be around their bosses, want to soak up that culture and impress and do presentations, the ones who want to run the company. And then I think there are other employees who don't want to run the company. They may be just as good employees and do just as important of work, but work is just a part of their lives and that complements the rest of their lives, and they're willing to pay a price, which is not to be CEO. Not even sure that's a price. But we are now in the midst of this war sort of sorting out, and as labor has gained power, they have had the upper hand, which is why most companies are at 3 days a week right now, with exceptions. What may change that may be a recession, if one comes. Let's hope it doesn't. Automation, which has now been accelerated by AI, and that may also change the equation and may move power back to management away from labor.
Thank you, Jeff. Next will be Selena Thomas.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, and for that passionate opening, because this is, my name is Selena Thomas. I'm the owner, founder of 6 Degrees HR Consulting. I am essentially the HR lady. I am outsourced HR. I actually started my practice, it's 10 years coming this November, and the shift in the worker has absolutely come from COVID. That has required us as HR practitioners to become very innovative. You wouldn't even use that word in HR 4 years ago. It was really black and white. It was the processes, and you're committed to that. And now, because of the change in the workforce, we've had to become innovative practitioners to help match what is absolute right now, and that you have those statistics that say that people don't want to come back to work. We actually have to incentivize hybrid schedules as a way to get people to accept the job or keep the job. And so it's going to be a great conversation. I'm excited about sharing the panel with one of my favorite people here, Gary. So nice to meet everybody.
Thank you. Well, Gary Sanger and I go back about 25 years. We were in a CEO group together, and it's good to have you on the panel, Gary. Go ahead.
So what's the job seeker want and what's the employer want? Simple question, not? I learned a new word here past COVID, and that's Zoom. I mean, it's a way of life right now. And it's a curse, and it's a medium, and it works for us. I'm a headhunter. I do retained executive recruiting at the senior level and at the C level. And so, how many of you here are job seekers? Usually it might be a third, 2/3. Here's a couple is all. I want to tell you a quick story. First of all, the backdrop is Sanger Associates retained firm. I founded it 25 years ago next year. So we partner with those business owners, public companies, private companies. Our sectors, anything to do with manufacturing, industrial, aerospace and defense, and consumer are the areas that's a client. You want to take that. Could you put that on speaker so we can see what these clients really want? I mean, that's how real this world is.
Sorry.
As to how we respond. So what do customers, what do clients want? When you think about what they went through, survive, pivot, go remote, keep their people, keep their staff, keep their alive. I mean, I went through having space to subleasing it and move to the homes and get the technology to support all of this. So what do customers, what do clients want, what do job seekers want? I'll tell you what they don't want, what the job seekers typically lead with. It's that BS thing about how long is my commute going to be? Does the CEO really care about that? My goodness, you know, you're going to be up to an hour instead of 30 minutes. I think they give you clues. They, the candidates, about what's important to them. I want to tell you a quick story about how you blow a $400,000, $500,000 job, and then that next candidate right behind it makes it. We previewed CFO candidates for this $500 million company. We had vetted this person, and he then was going to be in the next round of interviews with 2 of the lieutenants for that CEO. So the call starts out by Zoom, of course. It starts out by, tell me about yourself. Well, this guy had had a bad commute that morning to get to where he could Zoom. So he's moaning about the commute. True story. And then tell me about yourself. And 15 minutes later, the 2 lieutenants who I know very well, I said, how did this guy blow it so quickly? Well, whining about the traffic, 15 minutes about yourself, and they haven't asked any other questions yet. So they text back and forth and say, do you care about this guy? Do you care about this guy? No, we're done. So they wrap it up in 20 minutes. I called the guy and say, how'd it go? He said, went great. I don't know what planet you were on, pal, but it wasn't this one. The next lady that came in, positive attitude. She had had a morning from hell, quite frankly, but didn't share it, and then responded very directly about what that business needed. So what does that business need? I think the 2 sides of the story, first of all, I'm really proud of that client's CEO to say, hey, lieutenants, screen these people in or out so you trust your team. And the second one, she nailed it, and now she's the CFO of a $500 million company that's growing to $1 billion in 4 to 5 years. Great story, right? So what do clients want? I mean, we have a handful of searches here that we're working on. We have one that's working on being the chief delivery officer for a space venture, and this job pays $400 to $500K. And we'll most likely find this person out of Florida or Texas, and then we have to tell them that housing in California is pretty cool. How many zeros on that? We have a search we just finished for a CHRO. At the end of the day, got another offer. This is about $1.5 billion, 50 retail locations. Add 50 to the offer, they got her hired, and now she's part of the strategic team. I have a pitch next week, Orange County, semiconductor, general manager, and plant manager. So the variety of what that is, but the core especially is manufacturing. I'm Gary Sanger, and it's nice to be here.
Thank you. I'm going to ask each of them some questions, and once we finish with that, I'm going to open it up. But I'm going to start with Jeff here. Employee well-being has become a crucial consideration in work arrangement decisions. What role does mental health and well-being play in the adoption of flexible work arrangements, and how can companies address these concerns effectively?
It plays a bigger role than it has ever played in the human recorded history in employment, if that's a bold enough statement. My work and lots of other work showed about this great resignation. Our work showed that 50% of employees said they were, this is in the year coming out of COVID, 50% said they were looking for other jobs, half of them in other industries. And yet our work showed something confusing. 84% of employees said they were satisfied with their jobs. 75% were satisfied with their company's culture and their own responsibilities. And an amazing 59% said they were satisfied with their salary and benefits. No one's ever satisfied with their salary and benefits. So people were happy with their jobs, yet half of them were looking for other jobs. I think this was not a great resignation. I think, and I term this the great reflection. There has never been a time all of us across the globe sat for a year, year and a half, and looked at our lives. Whether we're 80 years old and wanted to see what we want to do with the time we have left, and today, 80, you still have lots of time, or 20 and starting our jobs, or 40 in the middle. most of us looked at our lives and realized, or half of us looked at our lives and said, we want to change. We're not satisfied, whether it's a tweaking or a complete reversal. We are looking now at our lives a way we never have before. Some of that was COVID. I think the effects of COVID are going to last for a very long time. My father grew up in the Depression, and 50 years later, when he was a successful businessman, still carried the baggage of the Depression. He couldn't waste money. He saved far more than he needed to save. He never, as much as he loved me, he could never understand giving up a job because it wasn't fulfilling. That wasn't what jobs were for. Jobs were to earn money, to take care of your family, and you got fulfilled when you weren't working. So this, we know before COVID that Gen Z has had the highest levels of anxiety, loneliness, and depression. I think that's because it's the first generation that has had digital media for their entire lives. But whatever the cause, we know they have unique needs that we haven't seen in other generations. I've argued that schools and workplaces will need to bring in mental health practitioners from time to deal with the transition, and then there will be echoes of COVID and what we've gone through into the future. But I think mental health has shown itself to be a much greater issue than we've ever realized. More people, actually there's a shortage of getting help in mental health because so many people are asking for it. And I think this has become a fundamental element of the workplace that employers and others are going to have to understand.
Thank you. Selena, Gary, do you have any comments on the same question?
I do. I have kind of a backstory to explain, and I'm so glad to segue from that. There was a time, so prior to being in HR, I'll give you a little backstory of me. I was a social worker, and it was an area that I could not continue to work in because it was difficult to work with detaining kids and so on. So I went into HR. So it's a superpower that I have a period of time in where I was in counseling psychology. So I get people really quickly. And I consulted for a show called Undercover Boss, if anybody knows that show.
Which one?
Undercover Boss. And so the superpower of being a social worker and an HR specialist allowed me to help that owner figure out what was happening. He became a fly on the wall. If you remember, they put a mustache on him and they disguise them, and they get to go into the environment and hear what their employees are saying and make changes based on that. And as that consultant who has social work and HR as a background, I'm giving him the process changes that he needs to make and the social changes, right? That's a great combination to have for someone who has a workforce that wants to come back. So 5 years ago, that worked really well. But you have a workforce now that doesn't want to come back. There's no undercover because everyone is leveraging to work from home. And so now we have to adjust in helping them develop a compromise to that. So it's no longer about what's happening in your workplace, what's the culture, it's how do you compromise to keep this workforce retained? Or, to Gary's point, what's going to happen is they'll always be looking for the next thing that allows them to do that. And so as a strategic partner to them, it's not just checking the box and knowing the processes. We've had to become really strategic in helping them understand how to incentivize certain aspects of the job. Maybe the reward is that you work on Friday, but certain metrics have to be met in order to do that. There are those questions that are asked during the interviews. That interview was really terrible, but we have a lot of people that come in and—
The second one was good.
The second one was good. First one, I get it. But there are candidates that come in and immediately ask for that. I have to develop a hybrid handbook for what are the policies for someone who does work from home. Can I require you to turn your camera on? What is the process of maintaining protected information at someone's home? There are a lot of details and nuances that expand what your processes and policies would call for you to do. So there's so many more elements that you have to consider besides the people part. There's now the processes tied to the people and what they want. So that would
Thank
be
you.
my.
Gary, do you have anything you want to add?
You know, an event happened for me at breakfast when the speakers started. And on our table, and I've looked here so that the guilty is not present, what do you belong to as your company? Who do you belong to? Why does that company exist? I think the challenge for you as bosses, for you in the C-suite, for you in the ownership, I said, who do you work for? She said, I work for the county. We had a little straw poll about how many, what's the population of LA County? Kind of innocuous question. We had a guess of 9 million and 10 million, 11 million, and 2 million. The answer is about 10. And the person I asked that to, who works there, said 2. Now, come on. What world am I in? Who am I serving? So I think it's really hugely difficult for that new employee. You screen, you bring them in, and whether they're at the 30,000 or 100,000 or many hundreds of thousands, what are you joining? And how do you get those years and decades of culture? What's made it tick? What's made it work? Boy, I'll tell you, you HR folks, and I'm a recovering one. I'm originally a farm boy from Idaho. And so be simple. You know, what is it that you're doing for your customer? And being really clear on that. You're being brought in to make a difference. Of what? What's your business? And then get some KPIs that measure the core of that. Because if you're not working for your customers, somebody else is, certainly in the for-profit area. I just think it's really challenging these days that I learned the new word Zoom.
And the worst thing was, I've been using Zoom for 10 years, but
Incidentally, if I could just, on Zoom, I mentioned winners and losers. Zoom was not only a big winner, it did something that's never been done before. Zoom went from a company almost no one had ever heard of to a verb in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Because we Zoom irrespective of whether we're on Microsoft Teams or Google Meets. It is really remarkable.
before I get to the next question, the population in LA County is 9.68 million, because I Googled it after Gary said 10, but Gary
And
got
he
it
guessed 11.
Yeah, I guessed 11. So I'm going to ask Selena the next question, which is, the feasibility and desirability of remote or hybrid work varies by industry and job roles. Are there specific industries or job roles where remote work or hybrid models are more or less feasible or desirable?
Sure, yeah, and I think, as I mentioned, we have to adjust our policies accordingly, but there are some industries that shine with hybrid. That's sales, that's IT, those science industries where someone can lend their specialty, not just to one company, but to several. But we can't do that in hotel, and I mean, we're here, and we have an expectation to have an experience. Even if we're here for a conference or staying, the experience comes from the engagement. And so there's telemedicine, but we like that engagement with our doctor. I have a relationship with my doctor, and I prefer to get any news from him in person, right? So we are starting to see people split what part of their company works best hybrid and can be done hybrid, because now we have cost benefits that we've all discovered during this period of time. And so certainly the sales division can be remote. And in my construction company, Albright Painting in Santa Clarita, biggest painting company in the community, there's 3 of their employees that don't even live in the state any longer because they were able to accommodate them remotely. These were admin roles where they're supporting the employees, whether that's the payroll side or benefit side. So those are things that allow a company to compromise and say, well, we can have cost benefits, still have the same team members, meet them where they're at in terms of what their family needs were. In some of these scenarios, it was, you know, something that we all wanted to do is, if we're gonna be apart, let us be near our family. And that was a big trend that occurred, and people were making decisions that, well, if I don't have to physically go in, the cost benefit for housing alone, I can go live in Idaho. I think we had several of our clients that moved to Idaho during that period of time. And so there are those industries that it's just absolute that you have to be in person. And again, hotels, restaurants, they were greatly impacted during COVID, but that is, I just saw this ad where I'm going to Las Vegas for New Year's, and there was an ad about a bar in the Venetian that is robotic now. And I was astonished because who goes to the bar? The bartender is part of the experience, right? And so as much as it was like a novelty, you know, the first thing Ron said to me was like, I want to talk to the bartender. Because usually they have a nice, pretty woman there. I'm like, okay, we'll get you to the bar that has a woman there. But it is part of the workforce. It is part of the experience. And I think you can see that in your own companies, and it is and can be a way to keep workforce if there's that issue as well. Because they are leveraged to come in and make that decision of whether they want to work in person, especially if they're specialties.
Gary, do you have anything to add on that one?
You know, I've seen the 4x10s catch better favor from certain companies, even some of the manufacturing facilities. I've also seen, as you get integrated into that senior management team, that executive team, that maybe to take a Monday off or a Friday off every now and then and work from home is prove yourself, show me your value, show me that you made a difference with this. I think that's pretty cool, right? And I think the single population that took the biggest hit during this time, and I don't know how you ladies do it, but the single moms, the moms, they have many hats. They got kids coming and going that was approved or not approved for COVID, right? I mean, it was brutal. I had a couple ladies that worked for me that just said, look, I can't do the part for you because I got 2 daughters, I got a kid, but you get that faith by that executive to say, look, I want you on my team. And as we get integrated into this, it starts to work. Friday or Monday or what have you. Fridays, now why'd we do Friday here in terms of the traffic in Southern California? Note to self, let's move this next time. It's difficult. So that piece of it, showing how you can be flexible, you're competing against a bunch of other companies rather than Monday, Friday, 8 to 5, and then have that meeting on Friday at 5. You know, I think those are days from the past.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, anything to add?
Yeah, I think Selena and Gary did a great job of explaining how the feasibility and desirability comes from industry, which type of industry, and which type of job description. But I also think there are other factors that have come significantly into play, starting with the home. Is the home set up for working from home? If you can have a dedicated office where you shut the door, it's ideal. If you've got 4 or 5 people in a 2-bedroom apartment where you're fighting to get space on the dinner table or there's noise, it can completely change the equation. When the internet really became mainstream, particularly with broadband, we looked at early people working from home, and we found there were a couple of rules that needed to be established when you worked at home. The most successful people working from home were those who got up at the same time every day. Importantly, this may seem trivial, but it's very important for a professional frame of mind, people who got dressed, who didn't try to do their work in their bathrobe. When you're in your bathrobe, you're in a whole different world. You had to get dressed. You had to establish ground rules with the family. particularly if you didn't have a door that could be closed. We've all seen the famous YouTube video with the newscaster doing his report when his little son comes into the room. But we have to have rules with the family. We found during COVID that we have almost universal penetration to the internet. We have not quite universal, but high penetration to broadband. But even those homes found they didn't have enough broadband for 4 people to be home all day, 2 of them working, 1 of them going to school, a 4th one watching Netflix. We had to upgrade our equipment. We had to upgrade our connection, sometimes at significant cost. It's one of the reasons some people don't want to work from home is they don't have adequate equipment or an adequate environment. So those factors came into play, I think, as much as what kind of industry they work in and what's their particular job within industry.
I want to add a couple of things.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Gary.
You also have to get used to that backside of a cat walking across the Zoom. And it's okay. It's okay. It's in the early days of this very serious discussion by this lawyer and talking about being prepared about everything, and in the backdrop you see an unmade bed. You start a meeting at 9, and at 9:01 you can't get in anymore. So the promptness for agendas.
And there was the lawyer who had the cat filter on and didn't know how to get it off.
But see, I think those are okay. The sense of humor and mommy or daddy, help me, the human side of it, it's okay. It's absolutely okay, but I think agendas, time frames, get some discipline with that.
To that
it's real
point,
different.
I actually made policies for a company specifically that people were dressed, they clocked in as if it was biometric, and that the camera was on. How many times have we been on Zooms and you just saw this person's professional photo? And that was an absolute to assure that as much as we're disconnected, that we're engaged. Because you can ultimately just walk away from the camera and, yes, I'm present, but really are we? And this is why a lot of the companies that were able to come back, and because of their industries, the owners were adamant that people physically come back as well. The disconnect had become too much.
That's admirable. Although we do know during COVID, nobody wore shoes and nobody wore pants.
That is very true. And I would just say that, because I'm in the HR field too, is that employers have to pay their employees to set up the internet connections, the office,
Firewalls.
et cetera, and they didn't always realize it. And I have 5 kids, and my daughter works for a large company in the entertainment industry, and they said, set your own office up, and that's against the law. But I would say this about remote work at home. The benefit of remote work at home is my dog is really happy, and I walk 5 to 7 miles a day now. So, Gary, let me ask you the next question. With changing workforce expectations and the increasing demand for flexible work options, what challenges are employers encountering in balancing return-to-work policies with evolving employee expectations? And are there notable disparities between what job seekers seek and what employers expect? And you may have already answered part of that.
Such a loaded question.
Such
a loaded question. I just think it increases the communication by 5x, 10x. Because what do you do if you don't know? You make something up. You don't have the water cooler. You don't have the quick coffee. You don't have the quick lunch break. You don't talk to that 30-year employee. So I think you make new rules that work. And candidly, I want to make those new rules that work around my great employees, my terrific employees. Not the whiner, complainer, I almost used that wrong word there. You know, the person that has to get the airtime and complains all the time. I don't want to hear from them. I want to hear from my great ones. And so how do you put something together? You get best practices. You're still in that zone, right? We're still getting some COVID stuff happening. We're getting into the season. the idea of getting great equipment, connections, whatever it would be, so your office works at home, I think you pick and choose what works for you. And it could be something very different. It could be something very new. My older daughter, in spite of my advice to not go into HR, went into HR, and she was the head of eHarmony for a few years, and now is the head of that for HR and admin for Jacoby and Myers. And so she talks about the town hall meetings by ownership, by top management, and they religiously do this. And they get the access to these few hundred employees that they have and to their lawyers. And what's happening? What's happening? I think that access to the reason why that business exists, what are you thinking in terms of strategy, having it regularly, getting those people that are hired mentored by the people you care about, not just because they might occupy a big job, but they might be not viewed very positively. I just think that communication piece is a big deal. And then the key things you measure, if the company's in trouble or the company's going great, they shouldn't hear about it on the radio. They shouldn't hear it on, if it's public, you know, on some Wall Street news. Share that. If you're not serving that customer, somebody is. So I think the communication theme on all this, and pick and choose big companies. I mean, I left them. I was with Citibank. I was with Security Pacific before it was acquired by B of A. I was with another few companies where they, you know, became the bigger part. I'm not that great at politics. I'm not that great at putting a filter here. And here you are in a smaller company where you can put that image together and make it work and make you feel wanted and appreciated rather than employee number 694,000 or something like that.
Selena, Jeff, any comments on this topic?
Yes, I think it's important to listen to CEOs that have experience. I had a great book that I read, and you can write this down. It was The Year Without Pants. It was written by the CEOs of WordPress, and it was like literally them explaining and sharing how their company evolved from being in person, and then explaining the processes of getting back to work, the whole experience. It was really engaging. And then another one, it's called Remote, Office Not Required. It was a deep dive by a company that is named Basecamp, and they also talked about their experiences. And so CEOs can take some of those experiences from what's been documented by people and then your own, and then marry them with what's currently happening. What is currently happening in your industry? How is it coming back? Has that industry changed forever? Because we heard that as well. And the companies don't just change, the industry changed altogether, and how people interface. So I would recommend looking at those.
Just briefly on this return to work and the culture and the expectations. We've been so focused on everybody was 5 days a week. Now some don't want to come back. Most companies have settled on 3. There's another model that I think that's really interesting to look at. A number of companies have gone to the model of 5 days a week for 10 weeks a year, and then coming back. There are times when everybody should be together, and if they are, that's where the culture can be built, the mentoring can occur, the serendipitous lunch. So it may alternate rather than just a straight 3 days a week. There may be 5 days a week, 1 week a month, or however. Some of companies are seasonal, some are not seasonal, but there are more alternatives to just everybody works at home, everybody works in the office, or everybody works in the office 3 days a week.
Good point, good point. I'm gonna open it up now for questions. I have some other questions, but I thought I'd open it up to all of you. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask one of the panelists? Yes, but speak up really loud.
I want to know, to the entire panel, have you seen any correlation or data that shows, based on age group, job is not tied to our personal, view of ourselves. It's not tied to our self-esteem is not tied to, like, I am not my job. I just work there. And if somebody else comes with a better offer, bye-bye, and I'm on to the, to the next thing. There's no loyalty, there's no, or even if I leave this field totally, I'm okay with moving on to the next thing because I am not personally this thing that I do. Have you seen that where any data that supports coming to the office or not coming to the office based on age group and the values that those different groups have?
Do I need to repeat the question? Everybody heard it? Great, go ahead.
I can say I just did a symposium at College of the Canyons in Santa Clarita, and a lot of Gen X employees came into the digital age, and their affinity to that and their ability to function in life with just that and not much engagement. And so that if that answers your question, that was prevalent in a lot of the return to work issues, that generation not wanting to come back and or asking at interview, how many days can I work from home? And is there an ability, you know, we're in the second phase, ready to make a decision, and then they're letting us know that they only want to work from home instead of it being in the front of the conversation. So that's been a trend that I've experienced in my travels.
Anyone else want to answer?
Age is the single most important factor in determining the attitudes here. I don't think it's fair to say that Gen Z or younger generations don't have loyalty. It's a different kind of loyalty. You ask people over the age of 60 to describe themselves, and their job will be one of the top 2 things they mention. Maybe they'll say, I'm a father or mother and have kids and this is what I do. You talk to somebody younger and it may be 5, 6 items down what they do. There's much more of what I described earlier as the person who doesn't want to be CEO, just wants a stable job. But their attitudes towards work, towards being there, are completely defined by age. Boomers don't understand Gen Z, or millennials. The reverse is true. A lot of millennials and Gen Z are waiting for the boomers to retire, and they don't seem willing to do that. There's all that friction, but attitudes really, on this issue of do I want to be in the office, what kind of commitment, age is the single critical factor towering over gender or ethnicity or income or anything else. Age is the determinant.
Gary, anything?
How can I delicately say I don't agree?
You don't agree. Okay, go ahead.
I think I did that. The Y2K world, those of you that look back in the 99, 2000, 2001, 2002 time period, my God, if you were an MBA, had a dog, worked out of your garage, and were pre-revenue, you were king and queen, right? You're on your way to make zillions. And some did and most didn't. Those that didn't have that, I mean, why are you even existing and living here? I see now, and I'm a headhunter, I do retained search. We do the average searches for those $200,000, $250,000 jobs. My clients aren't going to pay me to go find that 20-something or 30-something that's had 5 or 10 jobs in the last 5 or 10 years. Don't bother me with those because my client doesn't want to interview those. And so age part may have a relevancy to it. If you don't care about loyalty to your client, I don't care about you because I don't want to do my search over because it has a year guarantee. So that person, money only, sooner or later I think that career house of cards falls down. Thanks for the question.
And I have to say, of my 5 kids, I have one kid who's 33 who's had 4 jobs in the last 12 years since college. And I heard a rumor, but she might be looking to make another move. And it's all about opportunities. I don't know if it's about money, but she keeps moving up every time. So, another question?
Just a comment. I just think that it's got to be a combination of both. I mean, I'm a big baby boomer, right, in that category. But you have the baby boomers and the Gen X's that are running most of the companies that are looking for those traditional stuff. But at the same time, you have to appreciate the younger generation because they may move multiple jobs, but they're in the same industry, right? So there's some credibility there. But I think looking forward, I think what we lose, from my perspective, is that organic mentorship, right, to develop. So does that mean the way to the future is more highly specialized, compartmentalized jobs, so you can provide training online, in a book, because you're not going to have that side by side walking together.
Good point.
I think that's a good point. When you get the company that doesn't have obvious next steps, there might be one spot ahead of them, and he or she's in their 50s and they're going nowhere soon. Or you're in a company that doesn't keep up with technology. I'm not learning anything. I'm not staying up with it. That's the company that he or she will leave from. Yes?
Go ahead.
I wanted to kind of ask you a question from the other side of the perspective. So I too am a baby boomer who grew up working at large companies where a big part of the social life was actually working at the company. You go to happy hour, we had a softball team.
Yep.
And it really, people got married.
It's the culture,
It
of
was
the
culture.
company.
And
Was that with the boss? Is that what you're talking?
no, a lot of times I didn't even know who were going out until they got married. It was like, wow. It was a very large company. But I guess what I'm saying is, I wonder too if, now with the younger generation, if there's some of that culture is missing where they're at. So they don't think twice about needing to go to another company. I don't have friends here. They have everything's outside of work. And I do think that culture has a lot to do with loyalty. We have to first have good salary training and have a career path. But the culture is a very key part of why people stay at a company. And I guess
absolutely
I'm
right.
wondering if you see or think companies will eventually go back to that in order to maintain loyal employees, or because people like to socialize,
Well, I think the celebration of successes, of promotions, of levels of the bar and successes that you've achieved as a company, the winning a new client, those that integrate that, make it a part of their fabric, get the celebration of that lady or man who did that, or that team, they're the ones that are going to succeed.
I think currently you're seeing in companies that people person that is literally designated as one that's going to help develop the culture of the company. Because of the multi-generations within a company, they literally have developed a role designed around connecting those generations. And so that would be the way to bring that back. And so separate from creating policies, as an HR consultant, we're also identifying areas. If someone is saying to me as a company, like, hey, we're disconnected here. We have several different generations and no one seems to click together. It seems like everyone has their generational click, but there's not a company click. And so there's a people person that's literally designed to, as an initiative, to develop that. And so I think that would be the way to trend that back. And so if you look that up in current HR books and magazines, they speak to that role often.
And I would just add, as a fellow boomer who would have missed all those social elements that Gen Z and millennials care less about, and we know, for example, they don't like the ideas of retreats or all-day meetings away. All of that aside, there's no evidence to show that their commitment to their job and doing a good job of what they do is any less. They just don't buy into the whole package overall. But they are just, with of course notable individual exceptions, they are every bit as good at what they do as any generation has been.
I would add one thing, I'll get you in a second, and that is that if you Google remote employee engagement activities, you will come up with hundreds of companies that can help employers do activities such as olive oil tasting, margarita making, succulent making. There's a lot of things out there to build culture
Succulent making.
with employees, even remotely or in person. And they don't all have to do with liquor, okay, not alcohol.
It feels
Like
so
remote team
artificial,
building
though,
is what you're
remotely.
saying, Barry?
Oh, I'm sorry?
Remote team building
Yep.
is what you're saying?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm, part of the millennial generation, funny enough, and I find that we're, I don't speak for all of us, but we feel so far behind where we should be. So the movement year after year, 2 year after year, isn't just the feeling of, I don't have loyalty here, it's that I've got to catch up to where you are. And in addition to that, there are political blockades at companies that we can't get past. You've got great workers in older generations than us that can't be moved. We understand that. We can respect that to an extent if they're still performing. But if they're not performing and we have no clear path forward, what do you expect us to do?
So
That
they're
is a
absent of
that's a
succession.
brilliant comment.
Try working for an organization with tenure.
And that has,
Sir?
and that has succession planning. Succession planning is key. Like, I would encourage people to ask, not just about, the pathways, but what does your succession planning look like?
So I'm not a baby boomer, I'm just prematurely gray. Question over here,
Well,
speak
I want
up.
to go back, please.
Oh,
Sorry.
go
I
ahead,
think,
Gary.
I think this is a tantalizing question. In those successful companies, growing companies, and all the rest, your generation, bring us along, move us forward, make us use technology better, make us get more comfortable with it. Get those mentors that believe in this and see, those that pivoted to make the remote work work were those oftentimes, they had technology nailed, right? They got it comfortable for you in your kitchen, you in your bedroom, you in a spare area out front to make it all work. And those companies, they were amazing as to how they did, and a lot of them screwed it up. So as you look at a company that appreciated technology and how it serves the customer, how it serves that sales force out there, it's a big deal. Before this, had any of you ever gone to the doctor for a test and do a screen because, you couldn't go in because you're ill? No, hardly at all. But I think the technology weapon in all this, that's where you make your weight in, ask for a raise, because it is a big deal as to how helpful you are. I feel really passionate about that area. And if you think about where's AI, AI might disrupt 95% of the jobs in the next 10 years. Wake up, boys and girls. Wake up, teams. Wake up, companies.
And the next panel discussion in this room will be about AI. Anybody else?
I was just going to say, your problem is not only will boomers not retire, but thanks to health advances, they won't die either.
That's very good. Hold on.
I just wanted to add to what she was saying earlier. I'm in the healthcare industry by trade. I'm a nurse, and so
Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you. But in order to be able to really gain, that leadership levels that you're looking for in the healthcare industry as a nurse, you got to literally move around to different departments. And one thing I've experienced myself, and I've been in the healthcare industry for over 20-some years, not trying to give away my age, but one thing I've learned is we talked about, nowadays people having multiple, jobs, don't move around, you don't get those skills. And so that's why a lot of people within our age find ourselves, especially in the healthcare industry, find ourselves moving around so we can get to that level, you know, that we're trying to get to.
Okay, I'm going to call on Chandra in a second because he had his hand up, but since books are being announced by Selena, there's a book about mentoring employees, and it's 18 different ways to mentor employees because every employee is different. So if you Google 18 ways to mentor employees, that's not the name of the book, but I'm sure you'll find it. And go ahead with your question.
So I would like to sort of change a little focus. By the way, we've been talking a lot about workforce changes, but I'm more actually interested in the size of the workforce itself. If you look what's happening nationally, it started in rural America and growing across the country, where the number of students graduating in high schools and universities have been declining in mid-America over the last 10 years. It's now hit California, and we're expecting it to continue to decline based on forecasts. The issue that I have is what industry or employers going to do when our number of graduates available for you to employ is going to continue to decline. And you actually brought this up a little earlier, Selena, in terms of, you know, yes, we are increasing more automation and in fact, essence, outsourcing. But are those two going to be sufficient in order to make sure that we've got enough workforce in California? Let's leave it with California.
Good question.
Yeah.
Anybody?
This is why people are leaving California. I mean, that's truly the answer. Yeah.
Much bigger drops in Illinois, Michigan, and Minnesota, and so on. We just were the last ones to be hit, right? So, which means we're not going to go, you know, be able to extract more American from other states. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do we make sure that we've got enough workforce to support the industries that we have?
And I think it's important too, like for industries like organizations like VICA. I'm actually the incoming chairwoman for 2024 for VIA, Valley Industry Association, and we actually have an initiative, workforce development initiative, because we know forecast-wise that this is going to be an issue. And the workforce initiative is not just about creating pathways, but really helping the workforce that's not quite there yet understand where things are headed. And so we have to be collaborative about that. We're existing in the workforce now, but if we're not developing the generation that's coming behind us to understand where the jobs are, the livable wages are, the industries are, we're falling short of making sure that we're sustainable.
I think there's a couple of things, and you and I talked, Dr. Chandra, before. Having the right workforce, such a big topic. The vocational side of this, what Europe does, you know, I think we've been enamored with the 4-year degree, and then, oh my goodness, if you don't get the degree, then go get a master's and get an MBA and, you know, need another 50, 75 grand, and then you're more unemployable because you don't have any skills. So the vocational side of it, how about the pilot shortage right now? I mean, it's almost like you can do a drive-through, do a couple test flights, and they'll put you up in the front of the cockpit to go fly it. That's how desperate I think some of these areas are. But I think the balance of what it is you need, blue collar, skilled trades, I mean, those are beautiful areas for persons to get, you know, more skilled at, to get the certification, to get the degree.
And I would just add, when I was a little boy, the two things we were
You have a good memory, sir.
most
And my memory's longer than his, so I'm in that same thing.
The two things we were most afraid of was nuclear war and the population explosion.
Oh, yeah.
And we never talked about what happens as populations shrink, and this is a problem, an immense problem around the world. Japan is shrinking from 120 million people 10 years ago. It will be at 70 million people. They have to use robots to take care of their older population. There's real, and this is true in Italy. It's shrinking even more. China is now, for the first time, realizing what a disaster their one-child policy was. And in America would be shrinking as well. There's only 3 ways to deal with this. One is immigration. and I'm not being political, but without immigration, America's population would be shrinking. So one is to open immigration, legally, politically, doing it the right way. Second is allowing automation to replace workers. And the third is encouraging people to have sex more often. I'm serious. Well, Putin 10 years ago gave every worker a day off so they would go home and have sex. Not because he wanted them to enjoy themselves, but he wanted them to have babies. And that's a third way. A new baby boom would help.
On that note, gentleman right here first, and then over to you. Go ahead.
My question goes back to, again, I guess the intermingling between the millennial and baby boomer population. As a millennial, I know sometimes this is not an option. We may not be able to rely on the baby boomers for technology help in the workplace, but there is a lot of wisdom that can be taken from the boomer generation. Do you guys have any tips or suggestions on how to, best utilize that and best learn from the boomer generation? I think there's a lot of wisdom that can be taken away, but sometimes we're not sure how to interact with one another either.
Hey, I think a simple approach is, how do you make work fun? If you work in a job that you love, you're not working, right? Pretty simple, pretty crazy, pretty nutty. But how do you make some of these jobs fun again? And if you're in an environment that it's not, I'd keep my eyes open. I'd find something different. Because in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, do you want to be doing that? And finding some of the skills that can get you into maybe an adjacent field, but having fun at what you do and being really good at it. I think there's some fundamentals here that, regardless of COVID or not, COVID in a lot of ways just is a kick in the tail, to get you moving, to get you going in that direction.
Anyone else?
Every generation should be looking to the next older generation for wisdom, experience, not for recommendations on music. But we should all realize, the Gen Z should be looking to millennials, who should be looking to Gen X, who should be looking to boomers. There's something of great value that can be gained from every generation, and we ought to take out of that what we can.
Okay, I'm going to go to you, probably the last question, but go ahead.
I'd like to go back to how technology plays a role into the remote workforce now. So I'd like to see if you guys have noticed trends when it relates to technology or even workforce planning or HR policies when it comes to the teams going remote. So whether that's about trust in work, productivity, employee engagement, I'd like to see if you have any trends that you've noticed with tech or with HR policies that you've seen implemented since everyone's gone.
Yeah.
You can make data show anything you want it to say about productivity. You can make it say that workers from home are far more productive and that workers from home are doing very little work. It really genuinely depends on the individual. There's no good data on whether people work better at home or at work or hybrid.
Policy-wise, though, there are absolutely trends in what my lane is, which is I actually have one half of the handbook that is to the hybrid employee, and the other half is to the employee that's in person. And developing best practices for those, and we're starting to see legislation that speaks to what an employer is required to give an employee. Even under ADA, they're kind of being hidden in those spaces. So we're constantly having to stay abreast of what that is calling for so that we can write the policies from legislation. So it's not even arbitrary. It is truly coming from those levels and mandates.
How many here are on a bonus program? How many bonus programs? Hands up, really up. Maybe 25%. You know exactly where you stand on your bonus program, don't you? You got scoreboards, you got measurements.
Metrics.
I just suggest companies report and measure on what's important to you. What's important to you, and in a public company, of course, that's pretty obvious, even though some don't get that very spread in terms of what you want to measure. But if you're talking about making this conversion from XYZ ERP program to a new one, you know what that schedule looks like, and you know people are going to get fired if it doesn't get done well, and people are going to get promoted and bonused, etc. So scoreboards, reporting it, I think being very intentional about that is a really big deal. I think it's really a big deal. You get some of the bigger institutions, they're going to really look at customer satisfaction. They treat that very seriously. And I just think you got engineers of any type, manufacturing folks of any type, if you can't measure it, it doesn't matter. It's really a pleasure to be here this
Yes,
afternoon.
so fun.
I really like being here, Barry. Thank you.
Okay, let me just wrap up and say that unfortunately that's all the time we have, but obviously these three panelists were excellent. Let's give them a round of applause. Also, let's thank our track sponsor, Cal Communications, and for this panel, Jorgens and HR, which is my company, and USC, where Jeff is. And lastly, the next set of panels begins at 11:15, so spend some time going around looking at booths, and I'll give you my final words of wisdom, which I gave my kids as they finished school, whatever level they finished. Whatever you do in life, be passionate about it, have fun, and be the best you could be. Thank you very much.